I assume that you have shares that are going to be worth something after this IPO too.
I am a shareholder, yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk through a little bit of what we've heard this morning with Leslie talking about, I think the midpoint being around $9 billion. That is below the last private round of financing that valued the company at $12 billion. Is that something that surprises you, concerns you, or is this what you expected given kind of that transition from the private market to the public market?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can speak directly to the Pinterest valuation in detail, but I think in general, when you're looking at this cohort of companies, the sort of unicorns that are coming out now, between Pinterest and Lyft and Uber and Slack and the others, these companies feel to me like they're built to last, and it's sort of not where you start, it's where you finish. IPO pricing, as we all know, is sort of an art and a science. It's not precise, and you sort of, I think, like real estate, you want to price it at a place that's attractive and get a lot of offers rather than price it too high and then have that, home on the market that's been reduced 8 times or whatever. So my sense is that they're, probably coming out a little conservative, and then we'll see if where the demand comes in.
What did you think after watching Lyft's IPO? The stock certainly bounced back, but on the first couple of days of trading, there was quite a bit of concern that it was not going to be anywhere near the price that it originally had.
Right, yeah, there's some volatility there. I think there were some reports that maybe there's some short selling happening or what have you. But I think, these things, the real point that I look at is when the lockup comes up in 6 months and insiders and investors can sell. And that's usually when you see these things shake out.
Right. That'll tell us just how much they're willing to continue to put their money where their mouth is on these issues, too.
That's right.
How should investors be valuing Pinterest? Because there were so many questions around that with Lyft, because Lyft in particular not only is not profitable, lost almost $1 billion last year, didn't necessarily think that they can show you the road to profitability, at least in the next few years. What is different about Pinterest, if anything?
Well, look, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think Pinterest as a company has been a little bit misunderstood. People have called it a social network. I think in the S1 they were careful to say, we're not exactly a social network. We're partially kind of a search and discovery engine. We're a utility of a kind. We're a digital media company. So I think that, there are all those things rolled into one. What makes Pinterest different than a lot of other things is it's not where you go to post pictures of your friends and your family. It's not really where you go to maybe broadcast to the world something interesting that's happening with you. It's about yourself and interests that you have. If Andrew, you like baseball cards, you make boards. It's really for yourself. Maybe share with a couple of close friends, but you're not, telling the universe, I'm a baseball card fan.
Why take pains to say you're not a social network? Is that because of the potential regulation that all these social networks are going to be facing?
I think it's just because the usage is different, and the site, sometimes when you call it a social network, people come to the site and expect to see photos of their friends and family, and they see, I went out to dinner with my buddies, I'm going to take a selfie, put it on there, and it's not really what it's for. So I think, the core use case is really about discovery and being inspired and so forth.
Let me ask you a growth question, and this is true of so many of these unicorns and decacorns that have remained private for so long. Has the growth piece of this already happened? Right? I mean, that's sort of the big question. Because these companies have been private for as long as they have, the opportunity for the public investor to enjoy these sort of growth rides are now in question because they're getting into the game late.
Again, my opinion is that there is so much monetization potential left with Pinterest, given that it's really in the second or third inning of monetization. I mean, super early. 94% of revenue came from the U.S. and really from one product, which is the promoted pin ad product. I think there's headroom in terms of international markets. There's headroom in terms of maybe adding e-commerce offerings or doing ref share and things like that. There are new ad formats that are coming out. So all these things are still, I think, for them.
It's interesting, though. It's a different type of growth. You're not talking about growing the audience necessarily, maybe internationally.
They may not need to, right? I mean, they're going to grow the audience, I'm sure, internationally and domestically. But, I don't think, Pinterest needs to be at 2 billion users like a Facebook or WhatsApp in order to have a very interesting monetization story.
Why did you leave the company?
I was ready to come back to the venture side. I like working with smaller companies and startups, and it was a great experience for 2-3 years to be there and kind of see the growth, which was wild. But I think working in an earlier stage is sort of what I like to do.
One of the things you did while you were there was take care of a lot of acquisitions. Is that kind of the key to any of these companies, making sure that if there are competitors, they're kind of wrapped in so that you're not going to be dealing with a huge number of other companies that are kind of knockoffs or trying to do the same thing?
Well, look, I mean, I think you look at sort of Google and what they did with YouTube, and you look at what Facebook's done with WhatsApp and Instagram as being absolutely transformative, company-defining acquisitions. And so if you can find something like that would obviously be tremendous. I think there are very few assets out there like that. But one of the reasons I think these companies want to go public and that makes sense is then you have public equity that you can use to help finance some of these acquisitions. And you can point to it and say it's worth this, it's tradable, it's liquid, as opposed to trying to buy companies with private stock, which is always tricky.
Is that one of the primary uses, you think, for the public funds that they'll raise in this IPO, acquisitions?
I think it's one of them. I mean, it gives them, I think, optionality in that regard. I think another is obviously that you are able to incentivize employees and tell them, your stock options are worth this, as opposed to just kind of pointing to a private valuation. And you also provide liquidity for a lot of folks that have been there for years and years.